Welcome everyone to tonight's event. We are so appreciative that you could join us, whether you're joining us live or catching it on the video recording after the fact. My name is Deanna Rhodes, and I am the Executive Director of Connect Summit County. And our mission is to create a well-informed, stigma-free community with access to mental health resources for everyone. And so delighted to be able to partner with Mary Krista Smith and Communities That Care Summit County to bring you everybody this great event about resilience. You know, something Mary Krista and I were on the radio this morning, and it really dawned on me in our conversation is that a lot of people are experiencing something significant with their mental health that maybe they've never experienced that before. And so it's new to a lot of people. This is really an equalizing factor in the sense that we are all in this together and we are experiencing something in some sort of way. And so just really delighted to be able to bring a toolkit, some tools that you can walk away with, and also just address the conversation. One of the things that Connect Summit County is really focused on right now is anti-stigma campaign for mental health. And, you know, last night we talked a lot about how our mental health is very similar to our physical health. And of course we would go and get glasses if we needed glasses, or, you know, if we need special shoes to be able to run or to walk well, we would absolutely get those things. And so the same thing comes down to our mental health, and we need those tools, whatever those tools might be. So delighted to be able to do this today with you. And I'll hand it over to Mary Krista so that she can introduce Communities That Care and her organization.
Thank you so much, Deanna. It's a pleasure to be with all of you who are watching this now live, or as Deanna said, maybe watching it later. And I'm Mary Krista Smith, and Communities That Care Summit County is our community prevention coalition. And our mission is to foster a culture of health through collaboration with all of our community partners around prevention, and really to empower, whether you're a parent or a provider, empower you with best practices, tools, education, and skills so that you can foster your resilience and create health and well-being for yourself, for your family, and for our community. And I'm really delighted that we're here together. As you say, Deanna, it's very timely, it's very necessary. There's so much change, large and small, and so much unknown that we're all going through. I have kids in school, and I keep wondering every week, like, I hope they get to stay in school. And, you know, there's just a lot of things that we used to take for granted that were just going to happen, and we aren't taking those things for granted anymore. And more than ever, we need resources for being able to roll with change, roll with the unknown, deal with stress, and really model that for our children. They look to us, they pick up on our cues about, you know, how we're handling what's happening in the world. And so I am really excited to have Capito here with us. is a clinical therapist. She's been practicing for 14 years and has observed a broken approach to mental, emotional, and physical well-being. And what I love about M's work is that she aims to challenge how we think about and respond to adversity. And you may know her because since 2019, she's been working at McPolin and Parley's Park schools. And she's also at the Weileman School of Discovery this year. And we are so thrilled to have M here with us today to teach you more about your own resilience and to share that with the youth and families that you serve. So thank you so much for being here. And M, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary Krista, and to Betty and Deanna. It's been such a joy to partner with such proactive organizations in the community. I love coming up to Summit County. I get a little jealous sometimes, honestly, coming up there and working with the schools and the organizations that are there, because it really feels like a tight-knit community, where I live out in South Jordan in the Valley, and it doesn't feel the same way. So a lot of kudos to everybody in Summit County who comes together to create that sense of belonging and interconnectedness that really, as we'll see in the presentation, serves as a big piece of our collective resilience. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we have slides for the presentation. I will do this here. All right. So if you have any questions at all during the presentation, sometimes during a live presentation like this, or if you're watching after the fact, you might have something come up afterwards. So feel free to reach out to any of us. But my contact information will be on my last slide as well. And you're always welcome to reach out with any questions. But let's go ahead and dive right into the hierarchy of resilience. And so the first question is like, why a resilience practice? The goal of this presentation is to introduce you to the possibility of creating your own resilience practice, something that you do on a daily basis or on a weekly basis as frequently as you can in order to build up that resilience muscle. And that's the reason why, is resilience atrophies away when we don't use it. And so I think for a lot of people, we were caught off guard by the pandemic. I'm pretty sure all of us were caught off guard in at least some way. But the significant impact was something, we're going into a new year, we're hopeful, we're optimistic, we have our goals, we're back at the gym, and then this huge thing hits and changes the entire world. And so facing that, plus the layer of personal adversity that every single one of you watching has also experienced in your life, whether it's changes at work or sick kids or just the unknown of it all, having comorbid conditions that put you at risk, having family members who are at risk, and really facing mortality in certain ways. Just random things like needing to replace your tires out of the blue, or having your power go out for 2 or 3 days after the windstorm this last week, the earthquakes. This is how life has become, and it's a difficult thing to contend with when that muscle hasn't been used in a long time. So the goal here is to build up that muscle in the midst of chaos, I know, but it is also the opportunity inherent in the unknown is to create those resources that you have noticed now were lacking. It really brings everything to stark contrast. We think certain relationships are going to be there for us and then they aren't, or we think our job is going to be there for us and it isn't. Maybe we think we've got better health than we do. And after being in quarantine for X number of months, we realize I actually do have some vulnerability to depression or anxiety, these really normal reactions to being isolated. And so it helps to dredge up the areas where we can build up this muscle and invest in our own resilience going forward, so that when times get good, you continue that practice and you're more ready for the next curveball, which at this point, we're all just kind of curveball ready all the time. So let's start with a common definition of resilience. What are we actually talking about here? And I really harken back to Viktor Frankl's work, and Stephen Covey summarized that work well with this definition of, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in that response lies our growth and our freedom. And I really resonate personally with the freedom aspect, right? A lot of what has been happening in 2020 feels like we are at the whim of circumstances. And truly, we always have been, but it can really catch you off guard and throw you into a victim mindset. And I want to take all of the shame and stigma around the word victim from the get-go here. It's just a fact of our reality. We all fall into the victim mindset sometimes. It can happen when you're just sleep deprived, or you are pandemically deprived of your relationships and your normal routine. We get into a place where everything is happening to us and we don't have any power in that. And so resilience is really about finding your power, your freedom within the uncontrollable. It's a timely period to really exercise and find that freedom, that sense of control over you, yourself, since that's all we've ever really had. So I want to introduce you, this looks technical, but it's really not. It's a way we can look at resilience and where your resilience is at any given moment. This is called the Yerkes-Dodson curve, but really it's about what we call a window of tolerance. And so you can see on the left side of the curve, we have undemanding activities, maybe last year for you. Like things were like pretty routine. You went through your day. It wasn't like you were facing any significant challenges in that moment. And then you have, things escalate and you face a challenge, whether it's, navigating a car accident and all the paperwork and whiplash, or some other challenge in your life. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we get into excessive demands placed on us emotionally, physically, spiritually, and we hit burnout. And we've all been there. And most of us are there right now. I can totally admit that I have been in and out of burnout pretty frequently, especially the last couple of months, because it's gone on so long, right? It's one thing to rally right at the beginning and find a house project, or to just like tell ourselves we'll be fine. I know lots of friends making sourdough bread. But it's a different thing to be in that for month after month after month. And for me, like the biggest trigger into burnout around all of this is the term, the new normal, which freaks me out because I can't, like, I can do this temporarily, but I cannot do this forever. So we look at this curve, and everyone's curve is different, and your curve changes day to day. So sometimes you have a good sized window of tolerance, and you can handle your toddler throwing a fit in the grocery store just fine. And you can handle your boss being a little short just fine. And you can come home and even have your spouse be in a bad mood, but it's not about you. And then there's other days. And that's when our window of tolerance shrinks down to almost nothing. And we all have those days. It's when you're sleep deprived in particular, you're hungry, you're hangry, you're isolated, you're scared, chronic pain. So many things deplete our resilience, and we have been faced with many of them recently. And so most of us are going around with a very small window of tolerance to deal with life with. And it makes us short-tempered and difficult to be around. It can deprive our sleep even more because we're anxious. We don't do self-care very well. We're not very motivated to work out and to change that routine, since the gym isn't terribly safe sometimes, right? Like, there's just so many challenges right now to building up our resilience, building up and widening that window of tolerance. So when we recognize that our window is very small, the goal is to stop everything, take a walk, eat, sleep, address basic needs. And we're going to cover all of that in this idea of a hierarchy of resilience. But first, we just need to talk about the vulnerabilities here. So this is the hierarchy of vulnerability. And you can see at the very base, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, the base of the pyramid really needs to be met first, and then we can kind of move up. And it also spirals in the same way. So at our base, we have mind, body, soul, illness, right? So if you didn't sleep last night, if you're in pain, if your body is inflamed from all of these factors, if you've been eating junk food instead of fueling your body in healthy ways, if you haven't been getting any exercise, you've really taken out the whole foundation of your resilience. And there's honestly not many people that can tolerate much with that base gone. We just aren't very human at that point. And a cue here to remember that you're not you. It's like those Snickers commercials. When you are hungry, you aren't you. And when these things are going on, you can't possibly show up at work, for your family, or for yourself very effectively until those needs are addressed. Then we move up into one that has become very collectively familiar, into isolation. Our communities and our closest relationships, they do so much for us, and we are all so aware of that now. It is acute how important those relationships are to us now that we've been fairly deprived of them. And even if you have started to like really connect again as we've moved from, orange and yellow and these different things, there's still like a sense of distance, right? Like you can't hug each other unless you're quarantined together, and there's less touch overall. And we know from science that like we need to be touched. And we need to feel those connections, and it releases oxytocin and these other good hormones that help us feel mentally well and robust and safe. And we're able to go out and face the risks of our lives without worrying, because we have this community behind us. So there really is an opportunity inside of this to come together in as many creative ways as we can, because isolation is depleting all of us throughout this process. From there, we move up into feeling pretty meaningless in our lives, right? It's Groundhog Day on repeat, put my mask on, show up on my Zoom meeting with my team, and go through this weird Groundhog Day where I don't even change my environment very much, right? I don't leave the house very frequently. And I feel pretty stuck, right? So apathy can really settle in at this point. And then we have mindlessness, right? Because with all of these other pieces missing, it's pretty hard to be present in the moment and to enjoy it, to savor a meal, to meditate, or even just to say the word meditation after all of these other pieces are going is laughable. Like, to sit still in all of that pain, it just doesn't happen. And this, of course, as I mentioned, starts to lead us into that victim mindset. And social media and the media in general, unfortunately, across most national news outlets, really triggers this victim mindset where we have no control, scary things are happening everywhere, and it's all just going to happen to us. There's nothing we can do about it. And that right there will get you so stuck. And it's often how we talk to one another about this, right? When we see each other, the most common thing I hear in conversations going on around me when I am out or with clients as they come into therapy is just that social connection over how terrible COVID is, and how the next windstorm and the earthquake and the hurricane winds and something else is coming, and I have no power in it. And so there's an opportunity to change the script, even just in our little social connections over the phone or over Zoom, to say, here's the silver lining. Yes, the windstorm took out a tree and that is awful, but, it didn't take me out. Things are going okay. Everyone's safe in my home. Focusing on the positive, being grateful for some of our first world problems here in America. It doesn't mean you don't get to be stressed about them. It doesn't mean you don't get to have your emotional experience. It's just coming back to remind yourself that you are in control over you, and there's always people around to help, always. Even when we feel very isolated, there are always helpers in the community, especially Summit County, who are there to help you get back on track. And then, of course, at the very top of the pyramid, when all of this is going on, of course, we retreat from any kind of discomfort, which means we retreat from any opportunity. We retreat from opportunities to connect, to serve our communities, to get creative, to see possibilities within the chaos. And really, I think the only way through this successfully is to come back to possibility. So let's dig into the hierarchy of resilience, where we actually want to focus. From the bottom to the top, we'll go through each factor, but fairly quickly. So again, if you have any questions, reach out. If you have ideas, wins, we all love to hear that. And again, we're all trying to connect more and more. So feel free to share them on the Facebook page, on YouTube if you're accessing it there, or reach out to us directly for any support or guidance or connection to community resources. Let's start with the bottom. So the very first thing we need to take care of, and the first place to triage when you're melting down, is your mind, body, soul wellness. What's going on there for you? And this is really a different way to look at ourselves as beings. And some of you do this naturally, but in our Western culture, we're really trained to tease apart symptoms into different boxes. I have a runny nose. This is in the physical box. I have a headache, physical. I'm going to treat it with Advil. I can't sleep. Some of us will put that in the physical box, and others would maybe explore what's going on emotionally. It depends on the day, probably. But the real key here is that all of these things are completely intertwined into one system, your whole being. And when we take care of it from that perspective, we can actually address root issues much more effectively than if we just treat the symptoms in one camp. It's just like if you have suddenly developed migraines like some of my clients have during COVID, it's a pretty good clue that they are stress related, and that you might find more permanent relief by coming into therapy or taking up a new hobby, or, it depends on what approach you want to take. There's so many ways to address stress. And a lot of coaches and therapists out there can help you navigate and create a plan, or you might come up with one on your own if you just shift your perspective slightly to consider the bigger picture. So 4 core areas here to consider. How are you sleeping? Can you improve that area? Because I will tell you, the number one thing you can do for your mental health, your stress levels, your ability to get through this is to invest in sleep. We know from the science, especially recent science, that sleep is one of the most critical periods of our day. And in our culture, we take it for granted. We brag about going without it. We really don't give it much respect. And we in our minds, it doesn't matter if we don't sleep well, we're just gonna white knuckle it through. And it's always something that we can sacrifice. If the to-do list is long, we'll sacrifice sleep. And I have to tell you, when you sacrifice sleep, you sacrifice your ability to be human the next day, to have a human, happy, peaceful, tolerant experience. And we all need to invest in that more than ever, because truly there is a lot of challenge going on. Next up is diet. The way we think about food in our culture is really about flavor and speed. Like, what can I eat right now in the time allotted that will taste good? And that's about all we factor in. If you and your family are eating healthy still during this pandemic, kudos to you. But a lot of people who even started eating healthy at the beginning have dropped off, and there's no shame in that. It's been stressful. Again, if you're not sleeping well, if things have gotten off the rails, it's hard to focus on cooking or creating healthy meals on top of all of that. It's, again, just kind of shifting our mindset to being a little more proactive and picking just a few of these things to work on for yourself. Often I will say, even in these presentations, just pick one, just one area that you're like, oh yeah, that's where I need to do my work. Because that momentum, it'll cascade into other areas just naturally. We're pretty intelligent beings. When we start to take care of ourselves, it takes off on a life of its own. So consider, how are you fueling your body? It's just like the gas that we put in our cars. If it's crap, our cars aren't going to run very long and they're going to break down pretty quickly. We need to put in fuel that makes sense for our bodies. Exercise is next up. Really, it's hard. A lot of the gyms are back open, so hopefully, as you monitor your own risk scenarios and decide what your comfort level is, hopefully your routines are kind of getting back on track. But if you haven't had a routine, it's a great opportunity to create one. There are just endless possibilities when it comes to how you want to move your body. And I think most of us go through life thinking about exercise as a chore. And if you do that, no routine will ever last. So an opportunity here, an invitation to use this, second, third, fourth wave of the pandemic to dive into finding exercise that you love, that you could do, you'd pay to do it, right? Like, it's just so wonderful, whether it's rowing or getting a new special exercise machine like a Peloton in your house. Like, I can't afford one of those, but I want one desperately. Or going for a walk around your neighborhood or around a nearby nature park. Maybe hiking is your thing. Maybe it's kayaking. Find what works for you, because if you find something you love, you will do it to the greatest extent possible, and exercise just becomes a happy part of your life. And finally, one of the most contested areas in this particular foundation is spirituality. And so, to be clear, this isn't about religion, unless that is true for you. That if that's your source for spirituality, great, lean into it. If you are atheist or agnostic or any other belief that doesn't have like a formal religious place of worship, or if you just don't feel very spiritual there, that's okay too. But we're spiritual beings. We are truly connected all to one another. And the science shows, when we feel that connection, we naturally take care of ourselves in a different way. We naturally react to stress and to other people in different ways. We're more curious, we're more compassionate, and we just feel a bit more settled and grounded and safe, which we could all use right now. And so for a lot of people, that's just nature. It's going out into nature and being present, even if it's just for a few minutes on your patio each day and a longer excursion into nature on the weekends. It's a real healing source for a lot of people. And if it is for you, try to prioritize it. Some low-hanging fruit ideas as well, right? Just remembering any of these, and remember, if one resonates with you, run with it. More sleep. Can't tell you, if you're not getting good sleep, That's the best place to put your effort. Less sitting. We're sitting a lot in our culture these days. They say it's the new smoking as far as impact on our overall health and well-being. Less sugar. It's also a good opportunity right now to cut out the sugar. We've all kind of eased back into the junk food, emotional snacking, but you probably would feel a lot better with less sugar. And then feed your soul in any way that works for you. All right, moving up the ladder into belonging. Belonging really encompasses two particular factors. One is our broader community. And as I mentioned before, Summit County really has that sense of community. And maybe your neighborhood does, or maybe it's just your immediately adjacent neighbors or friends that you get together with frequently. You share childcare duties. It could be anything you choose. It's your people. And some of us have really delightful extended families who are our people. And we probably have 2 or 3 pockets of community. Investing in that community is paramount right now. And you might have to get a little creative depending on the risk factors present, but it's worth it. It's worth putting in the effort to reconnect with your community, to give back. And actually the science shows that we benefit most by the give back, not by the receiving. The receiving is so important, especially when we're in crisis. That's our first line of defense, is our sense of belonging in these people. But it's when we contribute that we benefit the most for our physical and mental health. And then we have wholehearted allies. Now, this is where I needed to differentiate as I was communicating with clients and in trainings and with corporate work. Like, there is a difference between different categories of friends. We tend to lump them all into one category of friends, but we have friends at work who are, proximity, right? They probably won't stay friends after we no longer work there, is the sad truth of it. Once you're no longer seeing each other every day over the cubicle wall, it doesn't happen. Or friends of proximity in our neighborhoods. Some of those friends will stick, but some of them are just friends because you live next door. So we have those kind of friends of proximity, and then we have fair weather friends who only show up when it behooves them. We have transactional friends who only show up to ask for something that they need that that they have, right? And that goes, it's not that any of these are good, bad, or the other, but knowing who your friends are, which camp they fit in, helps us have realistic expectations and invest where it makes most sense for us. So wholehearted allies are a very special type of friend or family member. They show up unconditionally, which means without judgment. It's the middle of the night call when you get a flat tire on the side of the road. Who is it in your phone who would actually drag themselves out of bed, maybe even in a snowstorm, and show up for you? And they wouldn't judge you or feel like you owed them from that. And you wouldn't feel like you owed them like any money or like an immediate favor. It's just the way your relationship works. It's the people who bail you out of jail, who show up when you are ugly crying. It is the best people in your life. And we have to show up as wholehearted allies in order to have wholehearted allies. So in the midst of all of this, a lot of us have retreated inward. We've gotten kind of stuck in our own experience. It's a really good opportunity to just reach out and see how you can help the wholehearted allies in your life. So a few ideas on nurturing your wholehearted allies. Figure out who they are, assess the inventory, and then show up unconditionally for them. Make a commitment to yourself to do so that you can actually have them show up for you in return. Nurture belonging within yourself. Sometimes that takes some therapy work, or you can do some exploration through books or workbooks or online trainings. There are a million online opportunities right now for personal development. And this is such a good opportunity because we have been sitting with ourselves for months. And it's one thing to not like somebody else. You can get space from them, even if it's your spouse, you can take space. But when you don't like yourself and you don't really accept yourself fully, that's something you have to deal with 100% of the time, 24/7. It's the most important work any of us get to do, is to truly accept ourselves unconditionally. Cast a wide net. Find ways to meet new people, to connect, and this is a skill that just pays off enormously over the course of a lifetime, to connect with others, to have those conversations. Even if you have some social anxiety or you're shy or you're really quarantining, there are still ways to reach out and connect with others and make new friends. And then nesting, which feels like an odd one on this, I know, but our spaces are reflections of belonging. And so a lot of us have been doing a lot of nesting during COVID. If you haven't, it might be a good opportunity to make your space reflect who you are, to really be authentic in it, rather than decorating for other people or letting it be a mess because nobody's coming over. It's an opportunity to feel like you belong in your own space. All right, a few opportunities here as well to nurture community. Consider who your tribes really are. Don't let them just be defaults. Right? Who are your tribes? Who do you care about as far as the communities you belong to? It might be the Thursday night bowling league. It might be your church. It might be your school community. It might be your extended family, but know who they are. Because as step 2 here, we have to contribute to our communities in order to feel like we belong to them and that they have our backs. So how could you contribute or bring people together during this time? Make sure you're connecting, that you find ways to plug into those communities, even during the pandemic. And then the final one, really, truly, we all are in this world together. We share this space, this earth. And so becoming a conscious world citizen, whether it's just picking up trash rather than walking by it, or taking care of a trail that you love, or, making sure that you're not harming, the environment through the products you use on your lawn. Like, it can be small decisions like that, but they really do reverberate inward. The more care we take of our shared planet, the more we feel connected to everybody rather than one person against the world. All right, and a quick note here, a skill set that people just love from this training. So this might be the thing that sticks for you. Communication, like being able to connect vulnerably, is one of the most valuable aspects of our human experience. It's truly, at the end of our days, what we care about is our relationships, and the most important relationships to us are the ones that saw us completely with all of our flaws and loved us anyway. And so the Four Horsemen is my favorite way to think about and remember what not to do in the midst of listening, right? Because listening is an increasingly rare art of a skill that you can practice right now during COVID over the phone or in person, depending on where you're at and who you're talking to. So first one up here is Tim the Toolman Taylor. This is the reminder, don't fix it. Respect the other person enough to know that they can fix their own problems and that they probably do not want your advice. They do not want you to fix it for them unless they specifically ask for your help. Most of the time we go into fix it mode just because we love and we care about people and we don't want them to be in pain. But we rob them of the opportunity and the knowledge to do it themselves when we jump in that way. Second is Sherlock Holmes. This is where we ask a million questions, again, trying to get to the root cause on our own. We take on the responsibility of ferreting out the problem so that we can solve the problem for you. So if you find yourself asking a lot of questions, start to ask yourself why. Most times a good question is A, there's few of them, and B, it is just curious. It's that Socrates question of like, and what do you think about that? What would you like to do about that? What do you think is causing that? It's a beautiful thing that other people won't even notice, but they'll feel very heard when you use open questions and not the drill down. Judge Judy is next up. Even the slightest facial expressions can convey judgment, and we really don't have control over all of that, and we are good at reading each other. So the key here is not to not express judgment, it's to not judge in the first place. Really practice pulling back. Everybody's on a journey that you know nothing about, even the people closest to you in your life. So there's no need to judge their decisions, even if you disagree with them, even if they're disappointing to you. If we stick in our own camp of how we're feeling, use those I statements, we can avoid creating judgment and pushing people away. And finally, my favorite, Kanye West, which is, it's all about me. So many times in our conversations, especially with girlfriends or other guy friends, right, when you get together, we hear somebody share something and then we immediately jump in with, yes, that happened to me too, let me tell you about it. Or we wait for our turn to talk about what we want to talk about. And this is just poor social hygiene. And you will have such a better experience for yourself and in your relationships when we avoid these four horsemen and really practice the art of listening. All right, moving up to meaning. Viktor Frankl is my favorite source of connection around the idea of meaning. And if you need a good short COVID read and haven't read Man's Search for Meaning yet, I highly recommend it. You can read it in one afternoon, and it will truly shift you into a very connected mindset around what means things to what are your values, what's meaningful to you. And a lot of times we spend most of our effort on things that aren't very meaningful to us. So it's an opportunity now to recalibrate. Viktor Frankl puts forward 3 sources of meaning: what we contribute, what we experience, and the attitude that we take. So in thinking about creative values, this is where we contribute or do a deed. This can even be, as in the slide, like artwork or creating a project at home. You are contributing. It's why it feels very satisfying to, if you shift your mindset and do the laundry as a gift for your family, right? To take care of them. That feels fulfilling. Or to make a wonderful dinner, a healthy dinner for your loved ones, or even just for yourself, connecting it to giving back to yourself. When we engage in creative projects like art or a remodel or anything, it feels like we are doing something good for the world, and you really are, right? And this can also, of course, lead into service work. So what ways can you contribute to the world around you, to your communities, to your wholehearted allies, to the broader world, nature, right? Picking up trash, recycling if you aren't recycling yet, right? Like these things have a profoundly significant impact on our own well-being. It's inherently self-serving to give back. Then we have what we experience, right? It's really, truly turning our day-to-day experiences into meaningful experiences by being present. That, again, remember, we're pretty high up the ladder, so you need to be well slept and taking care of your nutritional needs, right? And when you do those things, you can actually build up that mindfulness skill to be fully present in the moment, which allows a sunset to become so much more than just another sunset, right? We get 365 sunsets a year, and yet how many of them do we truly like experience? Same with the sunrise, same with just shared lunch with somebody, or our own ritual in the morning. How can you infuse it with more meaning? There's so many opportunities here to really deeply encounter our lives and the people in them. And then the attitudinal values, the stand that we take in the face of unavoidable suffering. And we are all working on that one. So what choice do you make in the midst of that? Do you complain today, or do you take back the control and say, what do I want from this? Given all of the options I have, what am I going to choose? And when you take back that power, you take back your freedom and your sense of well-being. All right, mindfulness. We've already started to talk a little bit about that, because in order to be fully present in our lives, mindfulness is a critical skill. And a lot of us, kind of resist mindfulness. It feels like woo-woo or a luxury, unnecessary. And we've tried meditation and it just doesn't work for me. But here, there are 2 critical things to know about mindfulness. First, if resilience is that space between stimulus and response, that freedom to choose, right? And when we don't have it, we just react out of fear and impatience and self-centeredness. If resilience is that space, mindfulness is the tool that chisels out that space, creates that opportunity to choose how we respond to life's stressors. And second, mindfulness, especially meditation, creates the opposite physiological state to toxic stress. So it moves us out of that sympathetic state where we are flooded with hormones and inflammation and we are prone to disease and illness. And it shifts us into that parasympathetic state where we have high levels of immunity, we're healing, we're sleeping better, everything is functioning better. So mindfulness, let's simplify this, because it really isn't anything more significant than paying attention on purpose, in the moment, non-judgmentally, right? Just in this moment. Can I pay attention? Let go of the to-do list. Let go of everything else that's stressing me for just a minute and not judge myself or anything that's going on around me. Just be present for this moment. And you do that naturally sometimes at work when you get into a flow, or when you're in a hobby that you love, or if you enjoy organizing, you're doing yard work or cooking, you find yourself in those flow states where you are totally focused on that moment. And that is a mindfulness practice. So you are probably already doing this pretty several times a day. It's just building up the skill by being intentional about it, thoughtfully being aware of when you're doing it, and trying to do it more and more often so that you can train your brain to come back to that parasympathetic baseline. Now, meditation is the most concentrated dose of mindfulness, right? Because you aren't actually doing anything, you are just being. It's choosing a focus, giving it your full attention, and then when your mind wanders, and it will, because our minds are thinking machines, there's nothing wrong with you if you keep thinking. In fact, if you stop thinking, that would be a worrisome sign. So you are going to keep thinking, and those little thought bubbles are going to come up, and as you go off down that path, your goal is to simply gently bring yourself back to whatever you chose as your focus and come back to it. I like to use my breath because my breath is with me all of the time. And when I do that coaching with clients, they can use it anywhere. They can use it in a tense work meeting. They can use it on their lunch break. They can use it in the car because our breath is always with us. But if you're a more visual person, you might use a candle flame. If you really tune into scents, like you're always picking up scents, you might use aromatherapy and focus on the scent that you are using for that meditation session. And it often is helpful to use the same thing every time until you build up the meditation muscle, until you get past that 2-week to 30-day mark where it starts to feel like necessary. You're like, you know, if you miss your meditation, you feel a little off and you enjoy it. It does happen, I promise. So using the same focus for that period of time is just good training. It's conditioning for your brain to say, oh, this is the time that I sit still. And it just gets easier and easier. And it is, from fMRI research, meditation can change the gray matter in your brain and really rewire it back to your inherent sense of strength and compassion and patience. All right, moving up into mindset, just 2 left. I love the hero's journey. It's created by Joseph Campbell for considering mindset. It's great to use with kids. If you're trying to help your kids around these things, there are great images online like this one that I created, and you can spot yourself in the hero's journey. You can use any example you wish. For example, this last Sunday, my fridge died after the power flickered on and off a few times while they were trying to repair things. And it was just too much for my fridge to take. And so I went on a hero's journey of replacing my fridge during a nationwide appliance, shortage. So there was a call to adventure and I leaned in, right? There was that moment where I was like, ugh, why me, right? That's that victim mindset. Why now? How am I going to get out of this? How can I fix it, right? There was that struggle, but then stepped across the threshold, went through the whole, the initial trial of looking online and then calling people and then finding out that we're in a shortage and that nobody had anything in stock, going to the Home Depot anyway, right? And then renting a trailer and then finding neighbors to help move it in, right? And there was the whole death and rebirth in that. I think that was the time where I swiped my credit card. That was the death and rebirth for me. And then you have the road back to your life, right? You come back in. And we're all on this journey. We could apply this to the pandemic just as easily, right? As we first started to hear about COVID back in March, it was like, what? How is this going to impact me? I don't want this. I just don't want this. And a lot of us refuse to accept the reality for a long time. And that's where our suffering is when we refuse to accept reality. And then we eventually all had to step across that threshold. Some of us were dragged across it, and that's okay. It's just where you were at, right? And we're facing these trials, and there's one after another, and we're just waiting for that death and rebirth moment where we get to start to put our lives back together. And it's hard to say what that's going to look like at this point. So we're all in the midst of it. As they said at the very beginning of this, we're collectively on this journey together. And it's the first time in recent human history that we are all on that journey together. It doesn't matter where you live. So when we think about creating a resilient mindset, it's about radically accepting reality. Asking yourself, when you're feeling especially anxious, am I arguing with reality right now? Can I choose whatever is happening to me? And who would I be without whatever story I'm telling myself? I might be a happier, more peaceful person who's ready to take on the challenge ahead of me. And all of us, it's not about shame. It's just about shifting as quickly as we can into that more resilient mindset so that we can take back control, take back our freedom. All right, final one is intentional discomfort. This is my favorite. It's what I did my TED Talk on. This is about stepping into new, slightly scary, and intentional experiences, what I call resiliency field trips. Now, we do have to get a little creative during the pandemic to avoid creating undue risk for others or for ourselves, but there are still so many opportunities to find slightly scary things, things that make you a little anxious, whether it's taking up guitar lessons during the pandemic and getting Zoom lessons from an instructor, or taking a Udemy course on something you've always been interested in, maybe sushi making, who knows, right? Something that makes you just a little anxious because you feel like you might fail. And then you do it anyways, and you're intentionally present in it. And the reason we want it to be new is because our brain locks in novel experiences. It is on high alert when something is new. And so it could just be a new trail. It doesn't have to be a totally new hobby. But when we go into new experiences, you are doing intensive rewiring of your brain to be open and flexible and to notice your ability to overcome and do hard things, which again, we could all use right now. This is a great way to jumpstart your resilience. And that is the full hierarchy, moving up from the bottom to the top. But there are no hard and fast rules about this. If you felt like you really resonated with mindset and you want to dive into Joseph Campbell's work and watch the whole series of Bill Moyer's interviews with Joseph Campbell, which are on Amazon, they're fantastic. And maybe that's how you want to shift your TV binge watching so that you empower mindset. It doesn't matter where you resonated. Lean into intuition and go with that first, because that's where your motivation is right now. Even if you're not sleeping, it's okay. If you're not motivated to change that, lean into where you are motivated. And again, you'll start to build that momentum until those other pieces come on board. So I encourage everybody who's here with us or watching later, pick just one thing right now that you want to shift. And it can be small. And it's sometimes better for it to be small. Just pick one thing that's not overwhelming. It's realistic for you to start acting on immediately, and then go do it. All right, so all my contact information is available here. Feel free to reach out anytime. I know Summit Connect is always available too for those of you who are living in Summit County, and so many other resources up there. So feel free to reach out. I encourage you, reach out, connect, find out where you can give back or where you can get some extra support.
Thank you so very much. This is my second time sitting through this presentation, and I have to say, I got just as much, if not more, out of it this time. So, especially for those of you who may be watching the replay, you might want to listen to this 2 or 3 times, because there are some really amazing golden nuggets in there. So thank you so very much. And Mary Krista, I wanted to invite you, if you would like to say a few words in closing, and maybe you have some upcoming things happening at Communities That Care that you'd like to share.
Thank you so much, Em, and thank you so much, Betty. I agree completely. I've watched this again, and I guess it's just where I am in my life right now. I heard different things. I picked up on different tools that I need to hear this week. So I'm very appreciative for you all sharing this with the community. And I would just say, you know, we have so many events, and one of the roles that we play in the community is a hub for all of our mental health and wellness partners that are part of our coalition. So please come check out our calendar of events at ctcsummitcounty.org, and you will find Connects events there, and health department events, and family cooking classes, and all things related to health and wellness and prevention. And you will be able to find this video, and the toolkit in both Spanish and English is available on our blog. And so I encourage you to come back and visit this presentation again and access and share those resources.
Definitely. Thank you, Mary Krista. And I would like to thank Communities That Care and Mary Krista for being a wonderful partner. in bringing this, this event and the one we had prior specifically for educators and coaches and physicians. I just thank you so much, Mary Krista. It's wonderful to collaborate with you. And you are just a joy to work with. Thank you so much for bringing your whole self every time we're with one another. Connect Summit County also has a number of events occurring. And I also just want to remind you all that we also have a peer navigation line. So if you or someone that you know is in need of mental health services or resources and you're not sure where to turn, because that can be kind of a daunting task, please go to connectsummitcounty.org. You will find our non-crisis peer navigation line, and we would be more than willing to help you through that process and assist you with any resources that we can offer in the Summit County area. So thank you all so very much, and we'll see you all again soon. Take good care. Bye-bye.